to the Grind to Growth to Greatness podcast. The best and brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, creators, athletes. We'll talk to them all, and we'll get the good, the bad, and the ugly on how they made it. Decoding the secrets of success. And now your host, Terry Barr.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our next episode of Grind to Growth to Greatness. I have a great guest today. I'm very excited to introduce you to her. Her name is Tracy Paleski, and she's quite the woman. She is an adventurer. She is an author. She is a public speaker, but she's done some interesting things in her life. She's been in politics all the way up to the White House, and she's done some other things with global companies. One is in our area. You all know who Giant Foods are, but she worked for the parent company, which is Ahold. I think they're a European company. But we're going to get to talk to Tracy about her exploits, her adventures, her books that she's written, and kind of get an overall advice and what she's learned from these adventures she's taken, and really kind of a collective look at her life. So I want to welcome in Tracy Paleski. Did I pronounce that right, Tracy?
So it took me a long time to learn how to say that name too, Terry. It's Pawelski with a well in the middle.
There you go. Pawelski then. Fantastic. Well, Tracy, welcome into our show. Welcome into Grind to Growth to Greatness. Thanks for being here.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. Thanks, Terry.
So, Tracy, what we like to do is we like to start off by saying, hey, tell me about your family. Tell me where you grew up. Give me a little bit of an insight so we get to know you as a young person. And then we'll dive into how you became a woman and what that transition looked like from child to woman and all the things you've done in between.
Oh, my goodness. That's a long journey.
It is.
So I grew up right here in central Pennsylvania. And I remember growing up around here, Terry, saying, get me out of here. And I wanted to go around the world and travel, and I have done that. And I think I went around the world a couple of times before I decided that this wasn't such a bad place after all. Mm-hmm. In fact, it was a wonderful place to raise a family, to be a professional, to get engaged with community. All of those things very important to me. Yeah. So I grew up around here. I was born in Harrisburg. I'm an only child of an only child. And one of the things that inspired me early on was this desire to serve and to serve as an elected official. And so I had my sights set on Washington, D.C., from a pretty early age.
How about that? Well, there's two things you said there. You said you grew up wanting to go around the world, and you've done that. And you grew up around wanting to serve, and you're serving in a political sense. Where did those two things come from? Like, where did you develop a desire to, because you and I are probably around the same age, so there was not the internet back when we grew up. Where did you get the burning desire to, hey, I want to go see the world?
Yeah, that's a good question. My parents were, my dad was a founding ski patrol at Round Top. Did you ever go skiing there?
Sure. Snowboarding. Okay. Yes, absolutely.
And my parents skied all over the world. They had a ton of fun.
How about that?
So I think a lot of the early pixie dust actually came from mom and dad and their adventures largely in ski resorts all over the world. Right. But when I was, this would have been before I actually took my first international flight, but I was an exchange student in England. I went to the University of Manchester. And that's pretty common today, and it's a good thing because it gives us, a view of the world in it and that cultural tolerance and everything. But this was back in the early 80s when it was a pretty big deal. So I spent a year in England at the University of Manchester, and it was a formative time for me. Really opened my eyes up, and I've had international friends. I talk to them frequently. And I travel all the time. I'm getting ready to leave for British Columbia on Monday.
That's what I read. I hear you're ready to get out there and do some other traveling. Now, when you're over in school in Manchester, do you think that is what kind of prompted you to perhaps serve in a political format, or when did that creep into your desire to do something different in the politics?
Goodness, that came before the desire to study overseas.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was Alan Drury's Advice and Consent that I read, and I was really a real idealist, and so
Okay.
I really wanted to see and very interested in politics and power and the three branches of government, and so when I graduated from college from Penn State University, I headed down to Washington D.C. to work for Congressman George Gekas, who
Yeah.
represented at the time the 17th congressional district.
It's dangerous to be an idealist. I think in a lot of ways I'm an idealist as well. And you can get your hopes and dreams crushed when you're an idealist. And how did you end up catching the political bug, if you will, and being able to balance that between being an idealist and realizing when you go to Washington D.C., unfortunately, you're not going to be able to accomplish everything that you thought you would.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. I was so fortunate to walk into rooms that I never thought I would walk into in my 20s,
Right.
and to work with a number of people in the U.S. Congress, and then to work for Dr. Bennett when he was appointed as the first drug czar.
Drug czar, yeah.
I remember, 1989, the first executive order from President Bush was the war against drugs, and
How
so
about that?
created the Office of National Drug Control Policy. So I learned so much, particularly about strategy and strategic thinking.
Yeah.
When I eventually, and I was at the end of my 20s, decided to leave Washington, and this is to the point of your question about being able to get things done and
Yeah.
how you feel. It was really to come back to Pennsylvania to run for elected office. When
about
you're
that?
down in Washington, you're the farm team.
Yeah.
And so, I was coming back to build my own political base, to run for office. I thought that was my destiny.
Destinies are good. I know that back in the day when you were there under President Bush, being in your early 20s and being in the White House was something that was pretty special back then. It seems like it's a lot of that going on now. A lot of young people are making big waves in the highest levels of politics. I'm happy to hear that, happy to see that, because there's some great young people in our system. But I want to kind of move forward on that. You got out of politics in Washington. You came back. You did some politics here locally. But I want to fast forward to Ahold and Giant Foods. You got into communication, and they're on a global reach there. You did some of that. Tell me a little bit about that and how you ended up there, and why the change from politics to global business.
Yeah, from moving from sort of government relations work to more strategic communications.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is the skill set in many ways is the same. And it's
Sure.
a lot about creating a compelling message. When I was, when I was at Ahold and at Giant, I had no idea that I would be able to make such an impact in local communities. And that was what was my driver with politics, was you wanted to make a difference in people's lives, right? And so, from the outside looking in, you wouldn't think, oh, well, in charge of either communications or community relations at a grocery, at a grocery store chain,
Yeah.
would impact people's lives in such a personal and significant way.
Yeah, and I read that. It said, when I read your accomplishments, and you've got a ton of them. I mean, you have, I can't mention them all, but all kinds of awards, all kinds of accomplishments. But the most significant professional accomplishment was while you were at Giant. Tell me a little bit about that. Tell us about what that significant accomplishment was.
It was, I remember June 2008, and we were entering the sort of the Great Recession, and the
Right.
price of milk was $4 a gallon, and the price of gas was $4 a gallon, and people were really struggling.
Yeah.
And at Giant, of course, when you're in the food industry and you look at how can I make the biggest impact in my community,
Right.
it was, of course, the fight against hunger.
Mm-hmm.
And so the company, not me, but the company and its leadership stepped up and said, we need to do more. And how can we, build or deepen, I should say, these relationships that we have with our food bank partners? And we had them all over the East Coast. but most notably here in central Pennsylvania with the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank.
Right.
So the drive there and the accomplishment that you're referring to was a program called Meet the Needs, and that's MEAT, Meet the Needs. How do we donate center of the plate protein that people really needed, do it safely? Because of course, food safety is a big part of the corporate mission as well.
That's right.
And make sure that we're not throwing away what is perfectly good food that people out there in our community need. So it was a team of people, food scientists and supply chain folks and operators and meat managers who got together to figure out the process that was then replicated in many other places, and I believe is still a signature program today.
Yeah, and that deserves high praise. I mean, we're in America. We're driven by capitalism. We're driven by making $1 here and $1 there, and a lot of companies do a lot of great things and don't get credit for it, but it deserves high praise to step back, and when a country's in need, especially some of the least of ours are in great need, for them to do something that's so dramatic and so long lasting, because it's been 17 years on the docket for that program, and I think that's absolutely terrific. We need more of that on a broader scale, but. So you spent some time at Ahold, you've done some other things, and obviously the thing that drew me to your story initially, and this happens with every guest I have, I see what's in the media and what they've done in this one accomplishment or these two accomplishments, and it gets me fired up and it gets me inspired to talk to them. But you've done so many things, but the thing that brought you to me outside of Ann Dieter Gallagher was your story about your long walks. And I've just recently got into hiking over the last couple of years. I've done miles on the Appalachian Trail. So I've always been kind of sensitive to those folks that are accomplishing big things, feats of amazement, if you will. You've done some interesting things. And in my opinion, when I read about them, you've done them as kind of a self-discovery, if you will, but you haven't gone out to break a record or do 100,000 miles in 5 years. You've gone out there really to self-discovery. You've done it safely. You've focused on beauty. You've focused on inner self. So I want you to talk a little bit about what you've done related to your two books. Let me pull this up so I don't get it wrong. But your first book is One Woman's Camino, okay? So you've done El Camino de Santiago. That's 500 miles. You've actually done that 3 times now, from what I understand.
Well, I've done the walk 3 times, but I haven't walked the 500 all 3 times.
Okay, all right. So you should have left it that way. It sounds so much better.
200. Was 200 okay the last time?
200 miles is ridiculous anyway. It's amazing. So I guess I want to start by saying, how does one decide when I want to do something big? I really want to go discover something about myself. I know you did it with your daughter, and that's cool. Maybe that's related. How did you get to a point where you go, I think I want to go to Spain and do this?
Yeah, what a great question. I am a great believer in reinvention, and that there are times in your life when you really have to shake up where you're at and take a step in a new direction to reinvent yourself. And so this is all connected. When I was ready to leave Ahold after a really joyful and rewarding career, I didn't know exactly what my next step was going to be. Yeah. But my daughter, Juliet, who had just graduated from Gettysburg College, she was going to take a long walk on El Camino de Santiago. And she had actually been an exchange student in that same northwestern corner of Spain. So she knew this, she was a fluent Spanish speaker. And in many ways, she was returning to a part of the world that she had once called home.
Interesting.
And I often say, I'm not sure how many 21-year-olds really want to walk 500 miles with their mom. But, kudos to Juliet for the grace to say yes. So in many ways...
Now, let me back up a second.
Right.
So you kudos to her for giving the grace to say yes. Did you jump in on that and say, hey, let me go with you?
Well, that's exactly what she said yes to, Terry.
I was wondering.
It was me coming along. Yeah.
Okay.
So
All right.
I was looking for my next step. And
Yeah.
in leaving Ahold, when people said, well, what are you going to do next? I said, I'm going to take a little walk across Spain.
How
with
about
my
that?
daughter. And so, it was what I thought was starting out as a mother-daughter journey.
Yeah.
It didn't take long for me to realize that this was my Camino.
Yeah.
And that's very common because the Camino, and actually many long walks, and I'll talk a little bit more about the Camino, which is 1,000-year-old pilgrimage, and is just imbued with spirituality and all kinds of sort of wonderful. They call it the Camino provides. There's so much magic on that walk.
Yeah.
But we walked 500 miles. We didn't always walk together, and it wasn't always easy. But for me, it was this journey of self-reflection, of reinvention, of thinking about. In fact, it's funny, I now had this opportunity. I hadn't run for office yet. And so my conversation with myself and with God was, okay, Tracy, is now the time? Are you gonna take that step and finally run for elected office? And the voice back was, what would you want to do that for?
Yeah.
Which was interesting and not the answer that I expected. So the first book is written, I have 2 memoirs, and the first one is One Woman's Camino. Talks a lot about community and tolerance and forgiveness and gratitude, all of these life lessons that really get teased out of a long walk. And, you don't have to be on a pilgrimage going across Spain to benefit from the rewards of, kind of stripping away the distractions of the day-to-day, so that you can really think those deep thoughts and ask yourself those big questions. You would love it.
Yeah. One of the things I read, and I wrote it down, it said, maybe it's not blessings. This was from another article. I think it might've been newspaper in Harrisburg. Maybe it's not blessings Tracy leaves Nepal with, but forgiveness. Above all, self-forgiveness when things don't go as planned. That was an interesting comment to me because that took a very broad accomplishment and really boiled it down. And I don't want to make sure that they didn't put words in your mouth, but talk to me a little bit about what that means to you. Most of all, forgiveness to myself, self-forgiveness. I was interested to know what your thoughts are on that.
So in the Camino, on the Camino in particular, there is a high point where there is a very humble cross, an iron cross called the Cruz de Ferro. And, the tradition is you bring something from home and you leave it behind, whether it's a stone or a poem or a memento. And the goal is that with it, you leave whatever you're carrying, whatever burden you're struggling with.
I see.
And for me, whatever reason it was all about forgiveness. And I think that we women in particular, and we mothers, we just carry that burden with us. Did we do it right? I wasn't quite sure what I needed to be forgiven for. So part of this, you don't solve all of your problems in 35 days, which is what it took us, by the way.
Sure.
Ask that question, Terry. How long does it take to walk 500 miles?
I did read that. Yeah.
35 days.
Yeah.
So, you don't get all the answers in that time, but you begin that conversation with yourself. And for me, it was just a lot about forgiveness.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the other statements, and it might have been in that same article, you said that you weren't sure that you were quite ready. And I didn't take that for some reason. When I listened to the other things that you've done, the podcast interviews, whatever, I got the feeling that wasn't totally physical you were talking about. I wasn't quite ready for the physical. That's obvious. I don't think anybody really is. But did I catch that right? That perhaps there was more about emotionally, spiritually, you weren't quite ready for what that gave you?
Oh, not at all. Totally unprepared.
Yeah.
I was leaving a busy corporate career. I was trying to train and get myself, ready for, what I was going to carry in my pack, which, by the way, is a wonderful lesson in simplicity.
I did read you said that. Yeah.
What is it that you really need to carry on your back?
Yeah.
And yeah, so you begin this journey, but it's really another metaphor for life, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're never quite ready.
Yeah.
And if you wait, here's what I think is the really important message, and that is if you wait until you think you're ready,
Yeah.
then you may never begin.
Yeah.
So we can't wait.
That's true.
There's a great lesson out there for women in particular who I think want to be very buttoned up about being ready for that promotion or that new position. And if you wait until you're ready, until you think you're ready, you may never say yes.
Yeah, I think that's true with a lot of things in life. If you wait till you're ready to get married, you probably never will. If you wait to go do something that you've always wanted to do, you probably never will. And I think most people, and you can tell me about your own experience, most people wait till, well, I have to have a job, I have to have a career, I've got to save some money, I've got to have a house, I've got to do X, Y, Z. And I think a lot of that's an American thought process. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. Okay. But I think even in my own life, I went through that, had a family, have 2 boys, married and remarried. And, the focus is on taking care of everybody else. And I think it's more so with women. That's in their genetics. They've got to take care of everybody else before they do themselves. How did you get from maybe a genetic predisposition to taking care of everybody else to saying, yeah, I'm going to say yes, I'm going to take that step whether I'm ready or not?
I'm a risk taker. So actually, I love to make sure that everybody's well taken care of.
Sure.
But I also am quite willing and have the journey of my career has been one, I think it's because you see so much variety there.
Yeah.
Are so many times when I have stepped into a different direction and taken a risk on myself. It's one of the other messages that I think is important for women, and that is it's never a mistake to take a risk on yourself. So even if you don't think you're ready, we do these things and we face kind of a sliding scale of success, don't we?
Right.
Where some things turn out, not as great as we would hope, and other things exceed our expectations. So I would just say keep stepping in the direction you want to go and don't be afraid.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to look at the most successful people that you can point to in our world, and that's globally. And I think almost to the exact number, most of them would tell you that all the money, all the success, all the houses, all the cars, all those things really don't matter. And perhaps they wish they would have done things a little bit differently. And yet we seem to never learn that lesson as adults. We always, at least I didn't for a long time. It took me 45 years to figure out, hey, I need to start doing some things to live my life and to take some risks and to put my foot in front of the other and go ahead and start. Is that something that you've always had? Is that understanding that I'm just going to go do the things that I think that I want to do?
Perhaps a double dose of confidence as I step out there. But I'll give you an example. When I was on the Camino, they have these things called form Camino families, and these very close relationships with people who you're walking with maybe 5 to 7 hours a day and having conversations and about the big questions and the important questions. Why am I here? What do I want to accomplish next? So one of the gentlemen who was part of our Camino family is a gentleman from Belfast, and he was on the Camino training to go to Nepal, to go back to the Annapurna circuit. And when we finished up, he said to me, Tracy, he said, why don't you join us? And I say in my second book, the allure of adventure at this point was, irresistible.
Yeah, that's like a drug for sure.
Yes,
that's a drug.
For sure. And so I was offered this invitation to go to the Himalayas, which I would never have, really thought of on my own. And so getting to yes has always been, a goal of mine. So, people say, well, why would you want to do that? And I think to myself, well, why not? And if not now, then when?
Yeah, and I'm not sure And then that's an interesting point. The things that we like to reach for, and it can be anything. It doesn't have to be the Himalayas or El Camino. The things that we reach for, and somebody say, well, why would you want to do that? Well, I'm not sure why I'd want to do that because I haven't done it. But it seems like it's a pretty interesting step out into the unknown. And I think overall it would be great for people, whether it's hiking, walking, whatever, to do things that are unlike you would be used to. So I agree with that. I mean, in the last 10 years, I've said yes to a lot of things I wouldn't have recently said yes to. So it's been a good exercise for me. The podcast was one of them. I've always wanted to do something like this. I'm going to do it. I don't know how to do it. I'm going to step in that direction. And it took me a couple years to get everything squared away to do it well. So I like that. I like that, that analogy, I suppose, is just to step in that direction.
You know what I think a lot of the driver there too is curiosity.
Sure.
So it really drives us to, like you say, you haven't done it, so you really don't know. Well, there's only one way to find out, right?
Yeah.
So you can be intellectually or culturally curious.
Sure.
And for me, particularly about the world, and walking is a wonderful way of, walking through landscapes and cultures and people. You meet people and you see what people, how they live and love and what they grow in their gardens. And so this adventure and this curiosity, I think, is what compels many of us to do things that we've never done before.
And you had something related to that. I thought it was great. I'm going to steal it from you. Thank you very much. Maybe you stole it for somebody else, but you said I was able, and again, that's speaking back because we're both about the same age. You said I was able to curate my life.
Yeah. And
I like that statement. And I think too many people let life come to them versus actually taking a positive step to curate their life. And so I really like that. And, don't let the things pick you, but go out there and pick them for your life.
And what's so interesting about that, Terry, is no one else would curate their life to look like mine. Right. Nobody else wants to necessarily walk around the world or write a children's book or teach skiing in the wintertime and run for office. And so I've cobbled together all of these things that make me me.
Yeah.
And what a gift and what a joy to be able to do that. So however you choose to do it, it will look only like you.
Yeah.
And Terry Barr and nobody else.
That's right. For
sure.
Yeah. So let's kind of fast forward a little bit. You got the invitation to go to the Himalayas. I don't know if I would call that a bucket lister for me or not. I think it would be great to go to base camp of Everest. I think that would be a nice trek. I have no desire to climb mountains. I don't know if you know Julie McKelvey.
I do.
She's in town. I had her on the podcast. I still stand in awe of that woman. I love the fact she's done all that. But I don't think I have the desire to do that. But you get the invitation to the Himalayas and you decide to go. How was that different than the Camino? And tell me about it, because you didn't get, I don't want to say all the way, but you turned around at one point because of some dangers. One of your folks got sick on the trip and so on. But tell me how that was different from Camino. I know it was like 12 or 13 days, but
yeah,
help me out with that.
Yeah. So, El Camino de Santiago is, everybody is walking in the same direction for a European first world country on a Catholic pilgrimage. So it feels very sort of familiar in that regard. Going over to the Himalayas and to the Annapurna circuit, first of all, in Nepal, it's a guest culture. And it's I said I'm a risk taker, but as a woman, it's never about, I think about safety. So I'm not putting myself out there in unsafe situations.
Yeah.
But I talk about the Annapurna circuit being like thousands of other treks on the Annapurna circuit, except for the fact of all of these unfortunate circumstances that happened.
Yeah.
And the first one was, it was 2015, and there had been a terrible earthquake. in April in Nepal, and
Right.
left 9,000 people dead in the Kathmandu Valley, and as well as up in the Everest region. So
Yeah.
as we set out to go, many trekkers canceled their plans because this was an already fragile part of the world, now made even more fragile.
Right.
We didn't know what to expect. We didn't
Sure.
know how devastating things would be. That was the first thing that happened, that really required me to assess. Okay, Tracy, are you going to go on this trip, or are you going to back out? I
Right.
decided to go forward. The year before, when we were walking, 40 people had died on the high pass that you cross on this circuit at a place called Thurong La. A freak storm came through, and trekkers and Sherpas and people were caught totally unaware. So
Yeah.
now I'm looking at these risks and I'm assessing. I said yes, and now I'm doing my research, Terry.
Right.
Now
Right.
I'm going, oh, okay.
Let's
So
do some due diligence there.
yeah, that's right. So we've got some things, we've got some real problem solving
Yeah.
here and
Yeah.
some deep thinking. And that worried me. I did lose sleep at night over that, but I still fought my way through and said, I'm going to go. That was one of the reasons why, by the way, why I turned around. My friend had turned back for health reasons. I was kind of on my own.
Yeah.
I was walking through the Himalayas, and it was like life. All of these things happen that were not planned, and you have to reach deep and ask yourself, again, I'm not unsafe. It's not, but am I going to go forward, or am I going to turn back?
Right.
And there is no shame should I decide that I want to turn around and walk back down this path.
Right. I would think I would think that's a very present conversation about yourself.
Yeah.
Here you are in the Himalayas. You're on this gigantic trip. There's danger. The fight, the internal fight of, do I take one more step, or do I commit to turning around and going back? Was that a conversation that went on for a while with you before you said, I have stuff to lose back home. I don't want to do this.
Yeah, not just for a while. It was a constant sort of every step you're going to say, or every hurdle that you that you met.
Yeah.
Okay, Tracy, now what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So it's like in life where you're faced with something and you go, okay, well, which way I have a choice. I can make a choice. And maybe it comes back, Terry, to that double dose of confidence where I said to myself, you know what, I'm not unsafe. And I don't have to go across that high pass if that's what's keeping me up. I came to the Himalayas, to take a beautiful walk in the mountains. And that's exactly what I did. So, that kind of that self-actualization or that self-assessment as you're going is really, wasn't easy.
Yeah. Walking in the Himalayas is a good way to kind of get rid of all the distractions and focus on the task at hand. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So take me back to that moment where you said, yeah, I think I'm going to turn around. What reason did you give yourself at the moment? Is it the same reason today? And how did you feel when you turned around and started back? Just tell me about that moment.
Boy, I have to think about that. So, once my hiking partner turned back, I was free to make my own decisions. Now, I was with a guide and a porter, so I don't want to suggest to you that I was completely alone.
I understand. Yeah.
I never felt unsafe. But many of the trekkers, there weren't many people. So it was a kind of a lonely walk.
Yeah.
I decided that I would turn around in an old trading village called Manang, which was before that high pass that I told you about that I was losing sleep over.
Right.
I wanted to take a little pony ride. You would see these workhorses up in the Himalayas and everything. So I thought I would treat myself to a pony ride. We would hang the prayer flags, not at the Thurong La, not at the high pass, but ended up above the what was called by the Gangapurna ice fall.
Okay.
And so I was accomplishing what I had set out to do, even though I was making adjustments to how I was going to do it. again, a good metaphor for things don't always turn out like we planned,
Sure.
but that doesn't mean that we can't continue, right? And
Yeah.
make the adjustments that we need to. And sometimes in thin air, and
Yeah.
quite literally. So I turned around in Manang, which was a very interesting place. One of the things that it was actually they had a little movie theater. They had a rough, they had some little hostels and things like that. It was like a
How about
gathering
that?
for trekkers and travelers
Okay. All
and
right.
traders on the old trading route.
Yeah.
And so there was this little kind of makeshift movie theater there. It had rocks on the corrugated roof so that it wouldn't blow off.
Right.
Let me tell you what the lineup of the movies. They were playing Into Thin Air.
Oh, jeez.
7 years in Tibet. And I think something called Caravan. And I just remember thinking, wow.
Yeah. The full immersion experience.
Really Into Thin Air, this is the last thing that I can handle.
Oh, Krakauer, he has a way of telling a story, doesn't he?
Yes, indeed. But here I am, worried about the high pass, and these are the movies. So, I turned around, and it was lonely. I was happy. I was relieved.
Yeah.
To be turning back. And, I think the full, it was quite emotional, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine.
To walk back down. I think my emotions kind of overwhelmed me.
How about
in
that?
some ways, and snuck up on me because there was some tears on the way down.
Yeah, that's interesting. I always love to focus on some of those transitional moments with guests, because I think in the moment sometimes you don't think about them, but once they're gone, you think, "Gee, I was stressed all the way up, or I was thinking about it all the way up," and then that emotional release when you've said it, okay. Now I'm headed back down to safety, or I'm headed back down to real life, or I'm headed back down to my life, can be, like you said, a very overwhelming moment.
Yeah.
Have you always been interested in writing, or your treks, as we'll call them, did they just elicit a sense of, I need to tell the story for myself and then allow others to enjoy it, or I want to tell my story to others because I think it's fantastic? What was your reasoning behind wanting to write a book?
Yeah. Well, let me answer the first question about writer. And so I have been a writer all of my life.
Okay.
I even think that, I've been a letter writer. And so I think that my early days as a letter writer led me to be a corporate writer. And the interesting thing about that is, as a corporate writer, it's all about getting to the point. It's all about, don't bury the lead and things like that. It's all about brevity. And then eventually turning myself into a creative writer, brevity doesn't serve you there.
It's all about the details.
Absolutely. If you are walking across northern Spain's Meseta, if people want to know, how hot was it?
Could I see the heat off the ground, right? Can I see the waves?
That sweat rolling down my back, getting getting everything wet. But so the journey as a writer has been a wonderful one, and I think that I just published my first children's book.
I did see that, yes.
So even being a creative writer and writing the memoirs, and now writing a children's book, you have to really evolve, and you have to think about your audience, and you have to, you have to grow as a writer. So that has been a beautiful journey. But back to your question of when did I decide that I wanted to write the story of El Camino de Santiago, One Woman's Camino. And actually, I was doing some speaking. I was out there telling people this story, and someone said, or people would say to me, well, do you have a book? Or you should write a book. And I had kept a blog, so I had the kind of the rich details of the journey, what I was thinking, what I was eating, how my feet felt, who I was speaking with, and what conversations I was having. Yeah. And so I was, I was able to sort of capture that like a journal writer would do, and was able to put it together into One Woman's Camino. It's not a series of blog posts, and it's not a travel log, because nobody's really interested in your travels, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. but it is a metaphor for all of these, again, these life lessons,
Yeah.
walking with gratitude, the whole concept of, I mentioned earlier, simplicity,
Yeah.
and deciding what do you need to put in that pack. And you better be pretty discerning if you are going to carry 15 pounds of
Yeah.
everything you need.
Well, from a backpacker standpoint, I mean, that is from a realistic standpoint. I'm still trying to figure out how to get my backpack to 35 pounds. I'm going to spend some time on the Appalachian Trail next year. And, I'm obsessing over my pack weight and everything in it. So it's definitely a good metaphor for simplicity, for sure. And I did read a little bit about your daughter, and was, her pack was 35. She took some books, and yours was 31 or whatever. And you made the comment, but that was what she needed for the trip.
Yeah.
That was something she needed. And then your trip was different. This is what I needed. And yet you're going on the same trip. So that was interesting. Little side note to that comment.
Yeah, I'm so glad you picked up on that, because what we need to carry through life is different. So what Juliet needed, in those big books and 30 pounds, and what I needed was anything to do with my feet. So if it was going to save my feet, then it was allowed.
Right.
Yeah.
Little more practical. I'm trying to figure how I can take like 12 or 14 pounds of camera gear. I love pictures, and I love taking pictures of almost anything. I love documenting that way, but we're gonna have to think through that, because with cameras come batteries and storage and all kinds of craziness. But we'll have to see how much of that I truly need, I guess. Right.
Yeah. I want you to keep me posted on that, because
Yeah.
that's a lot. But
It is
remember,
a lot.
on the Camino, we weren't camping. So you're wild camping, and you're carrying your gear to sleep outside overnight.
Right.
And your
Right.
camper gear on top of that. We're walking from town to town and sleeping often dormitory style in the back of a monastery or a convent, or in small, what they're called albergues. And, I in the chapter about tolerance, I talk about, it's not just tolerance for, people from around the world, but it's for the snoring and the farting and the things, and the hairy backs that you get to experience.
Well, isn't that funny? For those that haven't done any long walks, maybe you could give us a little practical view into that. I've done a few, and I've been in shelters on the Appalachian Trail with other people. That seems like it was to me. It was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to stand this. It doesn't take too long for that to kind of dissipate, where everybody's flat, wore out and tore up and hurting, and that becomes a minor malfunction there. Tell me about your experience with some of those irritations.
Yeah, well, we're all in this together, right? Although a good night's sleep is what you definitely want to be able to walk, 12 to 15 miles or however long the next day.
Yeah.
There are earplugs, and there are lots of things that you can do to help yourself get a good night's sleep. But you're all in the same soup together, aren't you?
Yeah.
Some nights it's easier. Some nights it's maybe it's noisy, or it's stuffy, or it's cold.
Yeah.
And you don't get a great night's sleep, and the next night you are doubly tired, and so you fall asleep on your feet. But I think this concept, though, about paring things down to what is it that you really need. So you need, at the end of the day, a hot shower if you get one, a place to lay your head, a warm welcome, a hug. You really get very discerning again about what is it that I really need here.
Yeah.
And I think it takes all of these things that these trappings that we think we need, and it just kind of casts them out so that you get very clear, crystal clear.
So here's a couple questions for you. They kind of go together. I want to ask them in tandem. Was there anything that you brought back about yourself that was surprising? Was there anything that you learned about yourself that was surprising? And did it change your outlook, the first trip especially? Did it change your outlook on the world as a whole and how we relate to it as an American. And I love America. I have nothing bad to say. We all have our problems and we'll work through those. But until you get out of the country and until you spend time in another culture, until you meet people that don't have the everyday things that we have, and we're blessed as Americans to have what we have, no doubt about it, you don't know. So tell me what you brought back that was surprising to you, and did it change your outlook on the global situation as it relates to an American?
Yeah. What I brought back was very personal, as opposed to the big global question that you're asking.
Sure. No,
What
I'm asking two questions though.
Yeah, no,
Personal
I'm
and
gonna try
global.
and
Yeah.
answer both. So
Okay.
the
Yep.
personal one was really a reintroduction to my faith.
Mm,
And it surprised me. I knew that I was on a pilgrimage.
okay.
But people walk for many reasons. You
Yep.
know, some are walking for adventure or culture, and others are walking, and trying to remember, and others are walking to forget. You know,
Mm,
some people are walking and grieving.
right.
It's everyone is there, sort of on their own path.
Right.
Clearly, you're walking from town to town and from church to church.
Sure.
And in these particularly medieval Romanesque churches, you know,
Mm-hmm.
they are so beautiful, and they
Mm-hmm.
are so just, I was so overwhelmed personally as a Catholic that my faith was just kind of bubbling up all around me. And I had time to really think about that.
Yeah.
So that was refreshing, and that stayed with me.
Mm,
And so, the whole concept of faith was really lovely. And by the way, when I got to the Annapurna circuit, you walk from Hindu country into Buddhist country.
right.
And it's the thing, you see the same expressions,
Mm,
particularly with the Buddhist prayer flags, and with
yeah.
the prayer wheels, and with the mementos and tokens that people leave behind.
Yeah.
So we're not so different after
Yeah.
all. So
Yeah.
that leads me kind of to your next question, which is, we're not that different after all. And when you walk with a community, an international, global community of people, it's often not about where are you from, or even if it is where you're from, it's with respect.
Yeah.
Tell me about your childhood and growing up, and how it
Right.
was the same. I think you find the similarities
Sure.
more than you find the differences.
Sure.
And the differences become things that are interesting. Like,
Right.
gee, I wonder, why it is that the Spaniards. I don't wonder anymore why it is the Spaniards take a siesta
Yeah.
from 2 to 5 in the heat of the day when you can't go outside
Right.
because it's too darn hot and there's no AC. And so all of a sudden you go, okay, well, gee, it's not because they don't want to work. They come back out and they work into the evening.
It's practical.
Practical.
Yeah.
So, I think it's just eye-opening in so many ways, and it has a
Right.
lot to do with respect.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
So let me kind of wrap up the last section of our conversation. I want to get an idea of over the past, let's call it 40 years for yourself, your professional career, your adventuring career, some of all the things you've really experienced over your life. We live in a very moment to moment society now. Young women and young men are both in the same boat. They're lost. They're not sure where they're going. They're not sure what their purpose is. And social media in itself, lots of times will disguise the true purpose of someone's life and get them going in the wrong direction. So I'd like you to spend a minute or two just kind of collating some advice, if you will, especially to young women that are just starting out as teenagers, struggling with their identities, struggling with their purpose in life or their direction. Give us some ideas how young women can really step into this crazy world with some purpose and some confidence.
Yeah, what a great question. I certainly don't have, a all the answers. I like to say, though, that, it's all really about taking the next step. And if you decide that, hopefully you're going in the direction you want to go. So you have an idea, the spark of an idea, of an inspiration, and you try it out. Again, we talked about making mistakes is okay. So if you find that next step isn't where you want to be, then just take the next step, right? And I think when you kind of take things down to this one bite at a time concept, it's much less overwhelming. And that you can always remember that this may not be a permanent place. So I'll just keep going. I'll just figure out what it is, where I want to go next. And I think that's what's led me to have such an unconventional path. And I would say that, there are many ways to get from point A to point B. And not all of them are a straight line. And that's okay. That's okay. Because it's so much more interesting that way.
That is true. Any regrets?
No, I'm not big on regrets. I'm really big on getting to yes. Like I say, I've made some mistakes and faced that sliding scale of success. Right. But even with the mistakes, you learn a few things about yourself. You've got a great story to tell. So if you want to write a book, it's always about the mistakes or the problems that you have to solve. That makes it so much more interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's true. We're refined by the fire. I think the Bible says we're refined by the fire. And for those maybe that don't know what that means, it just means we're perfected during the times the hurdles that we go through, and perfected in the stresses of our lives. And so I think that's good advice for everybody, but certainly young women. Take the next step. Don't be afraid to fail. Abraham Lincoln, I think, failed 13 times before he became one of the most famous presidents in the history of our country, and did some wildly successful things. So I'm certainly a proponent of learning through our mistakes. So any last words for our listeners? We so appreciate you coming on. Do you have anything else you can add?
I'm just delighted. I think I would go back to saying, if not now, then when? Yeah. Ask yourself, if there's something that you've been waiting to do and wanting to do, what are you waiting for? And to just start stepping in the direction that you want to go. There's just so much joy and so much reward. On the Camino, many of the typical landscapes that you see is this, this path zigging and zagging through a beautiful rural landscape up to the crest of a hill. And I think there's a reason that we can't see beyond the horizon, but there's so much hope and promise just over the top.
That's a great way to leave it. Thanks for stepping into our podcast. Tracy, thanks for being here. Tune in next week with another great guest. But we've had a great time learning about walking around the world with Tracy. And Tracy, thank you for coming in. And we look forward to seeing the next stage of your life and all the great things you're going to be doing.
That was a real pleasure, Terry. Thanks again.
You bet. Take care. Welcome to season 2. We'll see you later.
You've been listening to the Grind to Growth to Greatness podcast. Our passion is to talk to the brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, creators, athletes, anyone who's made it, and dive into their struggles, their successes, and their secrets. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Grind to Growth to Greatness. See you next time.